We'd like to welcome you today to horse session number 3 with Ty Cunningham here with Purina Horse Specialist. We're real happy with Chanute Bit and Spur Saddle Club for letting us use their facility for this. Happy for all the people that brought horses. We're going to body condition score, we're going to weigh, make feed recommendations, and have Ty just give all the knowledge, and we'll have questions afterwards. We'll be watching on Facebook for questions. We'll have questions from everyone here. We sure appreciate everyone, and we're going to turn it over to you, Ty.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. And so it's good to be here. It sure is a pretty day compared to the last 2 or 3 days that we've had to deal with in Oklahoma. It's been pouring down rain, I think, every day there. But it's cleared up a little bit today, and it looks like the weekend and next week is going to be even a little bit better. I don't know if you guys watched any of the other sessions or anything at all, but so I've worked for Purina for 10 years now. I do strictly horse is all that I do. I did show for a while when I first came on because I taught ag for 3 years before I started working for Purina. And before that, I trained horses and showed a lot of cutting horses. We had barrel horses and we had rope horses too. And so I tell people all the time, since we had barrel horses, rope horses, and cutting horses, that wasn't good enough. Our oldest daughter had to jump. So we got into the English side and did jumping horses as well. So I do still work for AQHA some, working some shows and with judges. I worked for Pinto's Paints, the Reining Horse Association, a lot of those for quite a while too. But now pretty much all I do is work with AQHA. Doing some of their world shows. I'll do the Versatility Ranch Horse Show for them, the Youth World, and probably not the Open World because my real job here with Purina doesn't like for me to be gone quite that much. So what I do is I go around and do a few clinics, seminars, and I go around and work with like Kent and crew, training dealers and employees about product and maybe feed recommendations, and just training them about all the Purina feeds, horse feeds that are out there, and kind of the proper use for them. Every store and every location, we do have quite a few products, so every store and every location carries something a little bit different, but we try to have some products that are the same throughout and try to get all dealers to carry a certain ones, I guess. So that they have something, we can train them and the knowledge behind those products and to know how to sell them and how to recommend them too. So that's something that we try to take some pride in. That's a little bit different, I guess, maybe from us and a Purina dealership versus going to maybe just a box store somewhere. Is when you go in there, most people don't know what to feed or what to recommend, and so that's why I like to go around and do this and help people. And we do a lot of feeding trials so we can show people the difference and what the feed will do with one that you can do in 60 to 90 days. And there are some that I tell people, like we've got a product called Ultium that's really high fat that runs 1900 calories per pound, and I tell people all the time, horses will change about as fast as grass will grow on that in the spring. You can watch them change almost before your eyes. People think I'm crazy when I say you can tell a difference in a week, because all of the old people and older time guys, they want to say, no, it takes you 60 or 90 days. Well, with some of the products that we have now that is really low in starch and sugar, but high in fat and calories, you can see a change really fast. So in nutrition and looking at horses, I guess, we look at them and by calories, what they're doing, what you're doing with them, if they're in foal, not in foal, if they're thin or whatever. So we look at calories in and calories out. And so we do a lot of kind of looking at the calorie level and counting. And then fat, soy, corn, all of that. You know, in the horse deal, there's all kinds of crazy fads all the time that comes in and goes out, always. So 8 years ago, fat was the major thing that everybody talked about all the time. They wanted more fat, more fat, more fat. all the time. But what most people don't realize, when you start increasing fat levels and getting them that high, you start affecting palatability a lot of times, and they don't necessarily always want to eat it, is what happens when you start doing that. And a lot of horses, well, horses weren't really designed to digest and to metabolize really that much fat. I tell them all the time, it would be sort of like me trying to eat like Michael Phelps, or somebody that's a really high performing athlete. If I ate the same thing he did, I would weigh 500 pounds and couldn't get around. And if he ate the same thing that I did, he wouldn't be able to perform at the level he needed to. So we look at different things from fat to protein, where the energy sources and where different things come from. A lot of the hot and the talking points right now is everybody is looking at and thinks the lower the starch and the lower the sugar, the better. And so everybody's wanting corn-free, soy-free, all kinds of anything free. And so I tell people all the time, as long as everything is kind of done in moderation, you're probably better off. It's just like in human nutrition. How long did they tell us there for a while that eggs were bad for you? Well, then they said now eggs are good for you. So it's always something, and there's always some sort of a fad that somebody tries starting. And I tell people all the time, my wife ran barrels in high school rodeoed, she college rodeoed her ex-wife, and so they are probably one that jumps on the fastest. Them and 3-day eventing in the sporting group will jump on something and run with it. So I tell them all the time, you could probably put a white sock on one horse's ear, and if it went out and won, next weekend there would be 20 of them out there doing the exact same thing. So it's just, I tell people, as long as you can kind of keep things in moderation and keep it simple, but yet know a little bit about what you're doing and the products that are out there, it works pretty well. I had somebody ask me just a couple of weeks ago, I had to work a barrel race, and there was a lady, and she said, I need a feed that has 0 starch and 0 sugar. And I said, good luck, was my answer to that. I said, you have to have some starch and some sugar for a little bit of energy. I said, low starch and low sugar is good if you have a horse that's insulin resistant, or a horse that's a very easy keeper, or maybe has been foundered. There's some horses that need that and require that, but not all horses have to be on that type of a diet. So they're all a little bit different, and we'll go through and talk about all of these tonight and kind of sort through them. And I tell people all the time, I grew up judging, and I grew up giving speeches. So I could stand here and I can talk for 2 hours and it would not be a problem at all. But the thing is if I do that, I won't answer 90% of the questions that you guys are going to have out there. So I think the best thing to do, and what I try to do, is give a little bit of a spiel, give a little bit of a talk, talk a little bit about Purina, and then we just kind of go into weight tape, and we'll body condition score some horses. And then I want you guys to ask questions or on some, and I'll tell you or give you my opinion, or if I don't know, I will flat tell you I don't know. I'm not going to lie or make something up, that's for sure. And so, but we do have PhD nutritionists that do work for us, and that is a phone call away, that if I ever get stumped or have an issue, I can call them. They tried to send me back to school and asked me to go back to school and told me that they would pay for it, and I said absolutely not. 4 years was enough for me, and I do not want to go back to school anymore. So anyway, here I am. I've been working for Purina, I guess. August will be 11 years now. So we will look, we'll go through and we'll weight tape some of them, and then we'll play a few little games here and we'll see. So we'll look at this one right here, this little half mare, and let's take guesses. How many people think that she weighs 500 and under pounds? One. How about 5 to, what do we want to do? Do we want to go 750 or 600? What do you guys want to go to? 600? How many of you guys think that she weighs between 500 and 600? About between 600 and 700? 700 and 800? 3? Anybody think she weighs over 800? You do?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we have these weight tapes that Purina has done, and I will tell you that they are real close to releasing another one for larger breed horses, I guess, and for drafts. So we've been doing a lot of work. I don't know how many of you guys know, but we feed all 3 hitches of the Budweiser Clydesdales, and then we work with all their babies, and we do help them with their nutrition from the time they're in utero or from the time they foal even, and we weight tape and check those babies, and then we also do it against digital scales the whole time we're doing it. And so with these weight tapes and with using them properly, you're going to get within 25 to 50 pounds at least, and that's pretty close in a big one or in larger breed horses right there. Most of the time, if you do it right, you're going to be within 25 pounds. And that's pretty close to doing deworming, or if you're wanting a body condition score or increasing feeding levels or whatever you need to do. And so on these, though, I will tell you there are arrows. So when you pull it around and you wrap it around the horse and come back, don't go to the end to the silver spot, because that's not the correct place. I tell people all the time there are little arrows there, and it will tell you where to, and you just pull it up snug and pull it up tight, and it will tell you where it goes.
She does
That's
too,
good.
yeah.
I was trying to say
I know, because she got me once.
So wrap this around. You're going to want to try to go over their withers and through to the heart girth there too.
Hand it under her.
So then you just pull it, and I tell people just kind of pull it right about where the cinch goes and then over the top of the withers, and then you're going to pull this up close and just kind of snug right up to, and it will pull to a line right there. So how many have you guys said under 600? So
Oh, I said between 5 and 6.
So she tapes at 760 is what she tapes at right there. So he was getting pretty close when he said over 800. So she was pretty close. So there are a lot of things that you have to take into account, I guess, when you're weight taping and looking at them, is you have to look at how deep hearted they are with their heart girth, so from the top of the withers down through their chest floor there too, because it will fool you every once in a while. So if we were, you guys don't have your little product guides yet, but so if we were going to body condition score one, I'll just read these to you, and then you guys can tell me where you think that she fits in and where you think that she's at. So with a body condition score of a 1, that's or poor, it's extremely emaciated. You can see all the ribs, tail head, hip joints. We can all agree she's not there, right? So then there's a 2, is very thin or emaciated, slight fat covers base of spinous process. She's not a 2. So then we go to a 3, which is thin, fat buildup about halfway on spinous processes, slight fat covers ribs, tail head prominent but individual vertebrae cannot be identified visual, hip joints appear rounded but easily discernible. I should have put my glasses on if I knew I was going to read this. Then you have a body condition score of 4, which is moderately thin, slight ridge along back, faint outline of ribs, tail head prominence, depends on conformation, but fat can be felt around it, hip joints, not discernible, withers, shoulders, and neck, not obviously thin. Then we have a body condition score of 5, which is moderate, back is flat, ribs easily felt but not visually distinguishable, fat around the tail heads, feels a bit spongy, withers round. Then 6 is moderately fleshy, may have slight crease down back, fat over ribs, spongy, fat and round soft tail head, small fat deposits behind shoulders and along sides of necks and withers. And then you have 7 is fleshy, which is slight crease down the back. Ribs can be felt, but noticeably filling between the ribs with fat. Then you have fat, and then you have extremely fat or obese. So where do you think she's going to fit in? A 4, so moderately thin, which is slight ridge along back, faint outline of the ribs, tail head prominence, and depends on conformation. But fat can be felt around it, hip joints not discernible, withers, shoulders, and neck not obviously thin. So you think a 4?
Here 4.
Yep. I would say maybe, so part of that is kind of her build like it talks about, and so I do halves occasionally, so I would say she'd probably fit in that 3.5 is where she would fit. And so to increase a full body condition score, basically you have to put about 50 pounds on one is what you need to go to increase one body condition score. And so for me, and it depends on what you're doing with them, I tell people if they're going to a breeding farm and they're going out somewhere and you're sending them away, I try to have them over the 5 and close to a 6, because sometimes when you send them somewhere, they don't take maybe quite as good care of them, or they get kicked into a pasture and get brought up to be ultrasounded and checked. And so I tell them to be on the air of a little bit heavier, because they're probably going to lose weight when they go there. I kept all of my show horses on the heavy side, mostly because then I didn't have to lope them as much when I went to an event too, and so you could get them ready faster too. And then if one gets sick, you have that weight to kind of fall back on too. So I usually try to keep them at about the 5 level to 5.5, and so, but it all depends on age too, and it depends on what you're doing with them, what you need them to do. Obviously, if you're jumping and going over fences that are 4 foot tall, you don't want one that's a body condition score of a 6 or a 7 probably. So that's a lot of weight going up and over. So, but I try to keep them in the 5.5 range, probably most of the time. But the older they get, the harder that gets to keep them that way. Or they stay that way, but their withers start sticking up a little bit farther and they get a little bit more sway back too. So I've got a 32-year-old mare there at the house right now that her only job is to take care of the kids, and she is a 5.5, but if you look at her, most of the time her withers stick up. I'm going to guess this horse right here is older, probably in late 20s too, I don't know.
He's about 20.
Yeah, right around there too. And that's what happens when they do get older. Their back starts swaying just a little bit more, and their withers stick up just a little bit more, and it's just something that you can't always prevent there too. So that is her. So when we look at, I'm guessing the Gildan. So when we look at him, how much do you guys think he weighs then? 950. Let's do something else though while we're talking about this one right here. So what is she eating right now? Is she just on grass and out in a pasture?
Do you know what?
I don't know what.
She's grain in both, but I don't remember
It's a
what.
Purina feed, and she started it like at the
February,
No, it's
March
April.
or April.
when
She
we had
started.
vet day out here, because he was out here and he suggested the feed for her.
She's doing Healthy Edge strategy.
Strategy Healthy Edge. And so, okay, so the Strategy Healthy Edge is a high fat feed out there that we have that runs at about an 8% fat to 10, right in that area right there. But if this horse is getting ridden a lot, Strategy Healthy Edge may not exactly be the right fit for her. So the Strategy Healthy Edge, what it was designed for, it's designed for easy keeping horses that are only ridden 2 to 3 times a week is what it is. And so when they designed it, what they did was they increased the fat level but decreased the calories. So just because something is high in fat does not always mean that there is a lot of calories in the product. And so Strategy Healthy Edge, they did a really good job of marketing that product, talking about the fat level, but it's mainly designed for horses that are being trail ridden and just used very lightly, but it's an increased fat level to keep their hair shining, their hooves growing and looking good, and their manes and tails shining too. So you can see her hair coat looks good, but in order to put weight on, you're going to have to overfeed that product by the recommendations on the bag by probably 3 to 4 pounds. Now there are some people that will do that. I had a racehorse trainer that loved Strategy Healthy Edge, and he fed 18 to 22 pounds of that a day. And I was like, a horse is not designed to digest and for you to put that much in them at a time. I try to tell people, if you're feeding over 12 to 14 pounds a day, you need to look at going to maybe a different product where you don't have to feed quite as much. We can always look and do a cost analysis and a breakdown and see, because a lot of times you can go to a more expensive product but still feed 2 to 3, maybe 4 pounds less of it, and you're saving money by feeding something that costs more because you feed a lot less of it because the calorie level is a lot higher. So with this one, the Strategy Healthy Edge, if that's what this one was eating and if they're riding her quite a bit, I would probably maybe feed just the regular Strategy. It doesn't have quite as much fat, but it will run about 200 more calories per pound than what the Strategy Healthy Edge will, even though the fat level is lower. And there are different products. You'll hear me talk a lot tonight about Impact Professional. I fed Ultium for a long time, and it is always my go-to feed on something that I'm trying to sell prep or fit or put a whole lot of weight on something really fast, because when you look at that product, it is a 12% fat, and it runs 1,900 calories per pound. So for every pound of that you feed, you're putting 1,900 calories in them. And so I tell people all the time, as far as calorically dense feeds, that is the most calorically dense feed that we have out there. Now we have a supplement called Amplify, which is a fat supplement that's 30% fat, and for every pound of that, it's like adding 2,000 calories. And so I will use that occasionally on some stuff. I'm using that with the Impact Professional on a couple of colts that I got in, and that people are having me ride, just to put weight on them while I'm riding them and to get weight on them quickly. Because Ultium is really low in starch and sugar, so it's really safe. And I tell people all the time, it's a product that you can feed 8, 10, 12 pounds of, and you don't run the risk of foundering or running into any issues, or horses that are really insulin resistant or might be insulin resistant or have been foundered. The 32-year-old mare that I was talking about, they foundered her at a breeding farm, and she lives on Ultium and Senior. She doesn't get any hay, she doesn't get any alfalfa, because she doesn't have that many teeth left and she can't digest it. It just balls up, turns wet, quids, and then it just falls back out on the ground, so she can't digest any of that. And so she lives on Ultium and Equine Senior, and that's what keeps the weight on her and keeps her looking really good. And I can show you guys pictures of her later that I have on my phone too. But Impact Professional is an 8% fat. It's very low starch, very low sugar, no corn or corn byproducts in that. And so with the low starch and sugar, I tell people you don't get, I call it the stupid energy that you get from oats and from corn, where horses will want to and tend to get high and act a little goofy. This does not have that in there, and so you can feed those products and it doesn't get them amped up and really acting crazy or on the muscle. So now I will tell people, a lot of times some of the products will get a bad name a little bit, because if you're coming from like a meal mix feed, that somebody is just mixing a 3-way blend of corn, oats, and soy hulls or something like that for you, and then you come to a product like Strategy or like Impact Professional, a lot of people will come to me and say, I can't feed that product to my horses because it makes them hot, or it makes them high, or act goofy. The thing about it is those meal mix products do not have vitamin and mineral packets to them, and so they're not getting any vitamins and minerals when they're eating those products that are out there. With all of our concentrate products that are out there, whether it be Strategy, whether it be Impact, whether it be Omeline, any of the 200, 300, any of those, they're designed to be fed at 4 pounds a day. So 4 pounds a day on those products will meet the vitamin and mineral requirement on a horse, is what it'll be. Now, if at 4 pounds a day they're getting too fat on those products, we have a product called Enrich Plus, and you only feed 1 pound. And 1 pound of that meets the NRC requirements for vitamin and mineral for them per day too. So I like to tell people, when they come from a meal mix feed and come to our product, they may feel good, or you may think that they're hot. Give them 60 to 75 days to adjust, because usually what happens is they're just not used to feeling good at all, or feeling what they need to be. And so I tell people, give it the 60 to 90 days, and most of the time, I'm going to say 99% of those time, those horses will feel really good, but then they will level off and they will come back down and just be where they need to be and where they're at. So just because they're getting hot when you first start feeding it for the first 2 weeks to maybe 8 weeks, just stick with it, because I promise you most of the time they will level off and come back down. They're just not used to being able to feel good. And so I guess that's my little bit of a spiel about that, because I run into that quite a bit, and people will come and they'll say, well, we can't feed those products because my horse is just too hot and acts goofy when I try to do it. So that's not the case. They're just actually trying to feel good now, and they're getting the vitamins and the minerals that they need for hoof growth, for hair growth, like for manes and tails, and they're getting the amino acids that they need, and just the different essential vitamins and minerals. So I guess that's my little spiel about that.
Doesn't those minerals make a difference? Like, for instance, calcium, whether or not
Yep.
that feed that they're getting is digestible and usable, right?
Yep. Yes. And so I guess my other spiel about everything too is I run into it mostly on higher end performance horse barns or racetracks too, is if you're feeding a good quality feed, and if you're feeding one of our feeds, and if you're feeding the minimum feeding requirements, and you're meeting the 4 pounds, and they're getting the vitamins and minerals, just be careful with all of the different and the 9 million supplements that are out there, because there is basically a mineral and vitamin wheel that's out there. And what happens is you get somebody that says, well, you need to feed more copper, or you need more zinc, or you need more 3 times the amount of vitamin A that you have that's in that feed right now. And so they start adding Clovite and Red Cell or Mega Cell and Calf Mana and all this stuff. Well, what happens is when you start adding all those different things and you start getting way too much of one thing, it will stop the absorption of 3 or 4 others. And so we work pretty hard on all these feeds and rations and try to balance them, and we have all these PhD nutritionists, and we have the research farm that's been going on up there. And so know that we don't just have somebody sitting behind a computer that formulates a feed, puts it out there and say, because there is 2 or 3 feed companies that are out there that says this should work. And so the thing is we've got the PhD nutritionists out there. They have went through, and we have fed it and went through all the exercise physiology with it and all these products, and we know that they work. The thing is it just may not be the right fit for what you're doing with that horse. Just like when we were talking about the Strategy Healthy Edge. We know that that works for what we designed it for, and it meets the vitamin and mineral requirements, but it may not meet the calorie requirements for what you're doing, and then so there may be something else out there. So the main thing is there are a lot of good supplements out there, and a lot of things that people swear by and works, and I'm not telling you don't use supplements, because it's a huge industry out there and there are a lot of really good ones and some that I do use. I'm just saying, be careful with what you do use, and don't take the mentality that if they say that 2 ounces is how much you need to feed, then 6 ounces is going to be 3 times better and they'll perform even better, because it doesn't work that way, because you can get to the point of toxicity at some point and go overboard with it.
So my question is, if we are feeding Purina products and that's all we do feed, do you recommend any kind of other like vitamin and mineral things like a mineral tub or anything like that?
So what I tell people all the time is if you're feeding and if you're getting and feeding and meeting the requirements of at least 4 pounds a day, I tell people a lot of times to keep a white salt block out.
Yeah.
And you always use a white salt block. People ask me about trace mineral blocks all the time, but if you will look at trace mineral blocks and if you look at the ingredients, it is 99% salt and 1% mineral. And so in order for one to meet the mineral requirements, they would have to eat like 4 of those red blocks a day to meet them. So I tell people, in my opinion, don't waste the money on the trace mineral. Just feed a white salt block, keep them out, because it just keeps them drinking and keeps them hydrated too. And it just adds that extra salt in there too. But if they're meeting that, then they're getting there. Now we do have, and we did come out with, and this is going to be a little bit of a sore subject with a lot of the dealers, is the tubs that we came out with. And we came out with some that are 55 and 125 pounders. Well, we are having, everybody wanted us to come to market with tubs. Well, we wanted to make sure that they didn't overconsume, they didn't underconsume, they got what they needed to do, and that there was something in there for them. So it has gastric support in there, it has the Amplify, the fat nugget in there, and they also have fly control in there. The 125 pound tubs work perfect and is going great. The 55 pound tubs did not. So they are, they got really soft after 3 or 4 days of being poured and made, and horses were over consuming on those tubs. And so it's not going to hurt anything. It's just we felt that that is wasting your money. And so we ended up pulling those. We're looking at different avenues of trying to get those made and doing some different things with those. But we do have the 125 pounders that we're using. And I keep them out and I keep them in the stalls. I do it with older horses or horses that I'm trying to keep weight. I do have some people that are going up and down the road hauling, like professionally to rodeos and doing some different things, that they're keeping them in the mangers just for something for them horses to do all the time. And they're licking on them and getting calories. They're getting the Outlast for the digestive support, and it just gives them something to do and added calories. So it's a good product. But if you're meeting or feeding at least 4 pounds of a day of our concentrate products, then that should be meeting the vitamin and mineral requirements for your horse on those products.
So you said you have the smaller tubs are the ones that worked, or you said the bigger?
The
tubs?
larger ones, the 125 pounders are. The smaller ones were not working. They were getting soft. They set up right soon as they were poured, and then they would get soft again. And so we're looking at maybe possibly getting them made in a different facility and trying some different things to get them going again. But right now, the 125 pounders are all that we're making.
Okay.
And they do have the fly control in them as well too.
And the larger ones there, you need 5 horses or 6 horses on those?
Yep. 4 to 5 head of horses per tub is what we tell people on those. So this horse right here, let's look at him real fast. You guys want to take bets on him? Or see how much you think he weighs? Everybody agree he weighs more than 800 pounds probably? Yeah. Okay, we'll see what happens. I'll get on the other side on some of those so you can see me weight tape them when I'm not in danger of getting my head kicked up.
So this may be a dumb question, but because his wither's a little higher, does that change anything compared to like the way hers is sitting not as high? Like you said that.
Yep, it will. It will change a little bit and it's going to change the weight. It's not going to change really what is going to affect us here in weight taping them, but we'll talk about some different things there. So this horse right here weighs right at 1,100 pounds is what he weighs at. So in looking at him, and you said he's right about 20?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, right around the 20. Does he have papers or is he just gray?
He's paper.
He has papers? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if she's got them.
So, because if I was going to look, I would probably have guessed him at the high 20s is where I would have guessed him at if I was going to say, just by looking at him, but you never know. all horses, I guess, age a little bit different. So with him, I would body condition score him and he would probably for sure be a 3, is where I would body condition score him. He could gain 150 pounds pretty easy and look different. With him, so with their hip right here and with it kind of sticking up a little bit and his withers being a little bit taller and a little bit higher right there, I would feed him probably a little bit more and feed him a protein feed, like a 14% protein, because that's where you get your muscle development and where you get more of the building and muscle building as well too, and then increased fat as well too. And you could put quite a bit of weight on him probably pretty fast. And so Ultium or the Impact Professional is what I would feed him. And you could top dress with Amplify if you wanted to, just to decrease the fat level and the calories in there. But you could, like if he was mine and if I was taking him to the house, I would probably feed him 10 pounds a day of the Impact Professional is what I would do, and get him to where I wanted him to be, and then I would start backing off to see where he would hold off at. Yep.
How many meals would you divide that in?
I would probably do at least 3 is what I would do it in, and divide it up into 3 different meals if at all possible. If not, you could break it into 2. I've got some horses that I will feed 2 meals. If they're a bigger horse, like if it was a horse this size and I was wanting to do it, I'd definitely do 3 to 4 meals of those. And like smaller mini horses or the donkeys and stuff, the more frequent you can do, the better that they do on that. And so just like with hay feeders too, and if you could put like a slow feed hay net in there full of hay and alfalfa, that works good too, because it just gives them something to do all day long. Or if they're out on grass, it works really good too. But he could gain probably 150 pounds real easy. And when he does that, he's going to fill in. Yes, his withers are a little bit high because he is older in age, but they're going to develop and they're going to put fat on right here, and it's going to cover up a lot of this and a lot of right here. We have different products that will make them change shape in different places faster too. And it's weird because like if you feed this horse Ultium right here, what he's going to do is he's going to fill in over his top line and over his hip, and the last place you'll see him put fat on is over his ribs. And it's crazy the way that works, because it is just a little over a 12% protein, but that's what they do because of the protein source that they use in there too. And so I guess the other thing that I will tell people, we'll probably have to shut FaceTime off because I'm going to get really long, but I want to talk to you guys and help as much as possible, and I'll be here till 10 o'clock if you want me to. But if you're feeding a product that is $8, $9, $10, $11 a bag, there's probably a reason that it is $8, $9, $10, or $11 a bag, and it's probably because it is a protein source that is cheaper or that is better utilized in a ruminant or a cow than is utilized in a horse, because there are different kinds of proteins that are broke down in different kinds of animals at different levels, and better or worse, I guess I should say. And so that's why I tell people all the time, the cheaper proteins that are better utilized, like in ruminants and stuff, they are cheaper, so it doesn't cost as much, but you end up feeding more of those products and horses not looking or is performing quite as well too. So Ultium, he would fill in over his top line and over his hip, and then the last place would be right there. So that's just on that product. The Impact Professional that we've been using a lot of, and Strategy. Like Strategy and Impact Professional are pretty close when you tag them and looking at the tags. And a lot of people want to go somewhere and compare our 14% protein, 6% fat to somebody else's meal mix, 14% protein and 6% fat. The problem is they use a different protein, they use a different fat, and they use different kinds of minerals. And so most of those proteins, fats, and minerals are better absorbed and utilized in something other than a horse, and that's why it's cheaper. And so that's why I tell people all the time is feed something if it's on there and you're feeding, and if you're trying to get this horse ready to go to a 3-day eventing and you're feeding something that says all stock, if it's going to keep a goat alive, it's probably not enough to keep a horse performing the way they need to do. And so I try to tell people, and if you're looking at just trying to keep them alive, that probably will work and be just fine. Feed that and grass and hay. But if you're wanting to perform on them and actually wanting them to look good and perform at a high level, if you're wanting to go to PRCA rodeos, or if you're wanting to go to maturities or cutting events or 3-day eventings or whatever, and if you're feeding an all-stock feed, you're probably going to get just an all right performance, and that's about all you're going to get out of that. So that's why I try to tell people all the time. So that's those two. So I don't know what we want to look at next or what we want to go through. So I think we're going to look at maybe going over and looking at a donkey.
We're going to bring the donkey to you.
Okay.
It comes out of a donkey rescue.
Okay.
So we're going to bring it in.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So does anybody have any questions on anything? Like I said, I can talk and blab all the time, but I want to answer your guys' questions and make sure, and I will be here as long as I need to, even after the camera shuts off in a little bit. I just like being able to be around and to help people with questions and answer.
Donkeys and horses aren't exactly the same, so what, from a feeding standpoint, what are some differences that you'd have to consider?
A lot of times donkeys are a little bit more prone to getting obese and are a little bit more insulin resistant. They are usually, for the most part, pretty easy keepers, and you look at with them products that are a little bit lower in starches and sugars, because what they will do when you start looking at donkeys is, for the most part, they're usually really easy keepers, and then you start running into problems, and now they'll want to get fat cones right here, and by the time when you start getting them right there and over the top of their tail heads, by the time they got them, I don't know how many of you guys have seen like the minis or the really small ones, and it just lays over on their side. When they get to that point, it's almost impossible to get it off of them when they start getting that fat. And so they pretty much will have to live off of enrich and air and water when it comes to that point. So it's really important on donkeys and the minis to not get them overweight and to overfeed them, because they will get really fat, and they can do it really fat and get obese. So when we look at this one, I know that she said this was a rescue and one that they got in not too long ago. Obviously, you can tell that they've switched the program, and if you say, how can you tell that they've switched the program than what this donkey was on previously, why would you guys say that?
The hair.
The hair coat. Exactly. Look underneath here and look at the shine compared to what this donkey was on before with the old dull haircut. Now, some of that can be parasite control, and so I'm sure they get them in, they have to worm them, work on feet, and work on lots of different things. And so parasites can be a huge cause on that. And so while we're talking about that a little bit, I guess, and we're bringing another one up, I want to talk a little bit about that and parasites. So how many worm every 6 months, we'll say? How many worm once a year? Once a year. How many worm every 8 to 12 weeks? Okay, 2 to 3 of those two. So here's the thing with that. If they are in a stalled area, if they are out on grass that is pretty lush and stuff, what I tell people all the time, and what we have to, we preach for a long time, the worm all the time. Well, what's starting to happen now is we have a lot of horses and a lot in the equine family that are starting to get resistance to the wormer, and we're starting to end up in a problem like the goat people did, because they were worming so often. And so I tell people, if you get one in and you can tell that they're worming, obviously worm them and go through the process. From there, I've got 2 horses, I guess, that's at the house that hasn't been wormed in over 2 years. So what I will do is every couple of months, I'll just pull a fecal on them and take them to the vet, and they will analyze that and tell me, because they'll look at the sheds and what they have there, and they can kind of tell you what worms they don't have, and what you need to use and what you may need to rotate with to get them cleaned out. But the thing is if they're not wormy, then you're wasting your money, plus you're just building a resistance to them too. And so I tell people all the time is if you get them in and you can tell, like obviously this one was probably full of parasites when they got this one, and they wormed her mare. So they wormed her, or Jenny,
Yeah.
I guess, since we're talking about a donkey. And so now you can tell that she's putting on weight, and you can see the shine in the hair coat and the short hair underneath, and that the outside coat is coming off too. So if you were to body condition score this donkey, what would you think that she would be roughly? 2? Yeah.
In the donkey
Two.
body scoring.
Yeah,
I would
probably
say
a 2, because you can see, I mean, she's got some long hair that's covering the ribs, but you would be able to see the ribs. You can see the spinous process over the top and the hip and everything there. And so I would say probably a 2. She's getting close to maybe a 2.5.
You can see her front shoulders pretty good too.
Yep. And some of it is just like donkeys. You can see a little bit more of everything on them until they do start turning obese. But even as fat as this horse or this donkey is, you can still see the point of the shoulders pretty good. And if you looked at this donkey from right here down, you wouldn't think that it was really obese, would you? It's from right here up. And so anyway, we'll talk about that one in just a little bit too.
Does
So
that one have a little bit of like the roll on its neck you were talking about?
yes.
crest.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
His crest is like 9 inches wide.
Yep. So does anybody want to take a guess on how much this one weighs?
Probably 6.
425.
425? Anybody else want to guess before we do it?
I guess 450.
So she measures right, but about 415. 410 to 415 is where she, and so ideally, like with this size and this height, 50 pounds is going to make a huge difference in this donkey, where 50 pounds won't make that much of a difference in this horse. So he weighed what, 1130? Is that what he was?
I thought he was right at
1100.
Yeah, 1100. And so this horse could weigh 1300 pounds pretty easy. This one gaining 15 pounds or 50 pounds on this donkey is going to change the body condition score by about 3 levels, is what it's going to do on her, just because size and so much smaller. And so when we talked about that and changing body condition score, we were talking kind of closer to a horse is what we were talking about. But still, that's why we look at body condition scoring, not just weight taking, because different horses need to weigh different amounts, and different size horses, ponies or whatever. And so, and obviously a miniature is going to even less weight is going to change their body condition scores faster too. So when we talk about the white donkey over here,
That's Jasper.
so this right here, what would you think body condition score? What would you score this one at? Yep. So here's the thing with this donkey is everybody is going to think that it's going to fit on the obese category. But the other thing you have to look at is this donkey, I wouldn't consider it obese. This donkey is insulin resistant, is its problem. So it was obese at some point. And so when you start talking about this, it's basically like almost like a diabetic human and stuff too. And it can't process stuff. So when they get to this point right here, this right here is probably never going to come off or go away. Now again, they're stuck with it almost. Even if they get down really poor like that, for the most part, once they get to and reach this point right here,
So is that the same with a mule?
will hardly ever go. Yeah, will hardly ever go away. So this, what she probably looks at, and probably what she feeds this donkey now, is a good quality feed, but really low starch and really low sugar. Because anything with any starch and sugars in it, this horse cannot process and digest, and it's just going to make all this even worse. So you get the fat pones here, you get them over the top right here and over the neck. So I'm going to guess at one point this donkey probably weighed 100 or 150 pounds more, or maybe more. Yeah, and so they pulled weight off, and so.
So, in regards to that, we have, and the reason I asked, we have a mule that has that same issue, and we feed her nothing, grass, that's it.
Yep.
How do you have to start feeding her something? Would that help her?
So when you look at this right here, you're talking about starches and sugar. And so the only way to start working on that if they are out on pasture is because they're getting the starches and sugar from grass. So you have to dry lot them and then turn them out to where they can graze maybe an hour a day, 2 hours a day, and then keep them up and keep them dry lotted and pull that away from them. But then feed them grain product that's also low in starch and sugar, where you can keep weight on them and they don't get too poor, but you have to watch their starch and sugar intake. So because basically they're insulin resistant is what they are.
Does Purina have a product for that?
So we do. So on these products right here, you feed something and it just depends. You run into horses that are insulin resistant that can be really hard keepers, and then you run into some that are really easy keepers too. And so most of the time it's because they're overweight and really easy keepers. And so we feed a lot of Enrich Plus is what we feed. So this one would eat 1 pound a day, meets the vitamin and mineral requirements and gets the protein that it needs, but very, very low. And we can look at these books, and you guys will all have a book later on, and it will show in the back of these books, back here on page 68 and 69, it lists all of our products across here, and it shows you the starch and sugar levels in every product that we have that's out there too, and all the feeds. And you would want to feed it something to the far side. We have some products called WellSolve, that's LS for low starch, and then we also have a weight control one too that we have out there. But Enrich works really good on these horses and donkeys that get obese and have insulin resistant problems. There are some other ones out there. Ultium is low starch and sugar, and so is the Impact, and they work well on some. Like if this donkey looked like this but still had a crest on its neck, it would be one of the ones that's maybe harder keepers but still insulin resistant. So you'd feed it a higher calorie, higher fat feed, but you would feed it something with really low starch and low sugar. So these and minis are the ones that you run into. It's the older horse or the bigger horses like this, they don't usually run into any sort of problems like that until they get in their late 20s and 30s. And you start running into problems like with the Cushing's disease is what you start running into. And that's when you start having to live with it. These donkeys and any of the minis, they're the ones that you kind of have to watch with the obesity problems. They develop that insulin resistance or sensitivity in some of them. Like you can tell, like this donkey right here, at some point, probably pretty soon, because you can feel the neck right there, it's going to have a little bit of sensitivity to it right now. So the other thing about this is when you start feeding horses or donkeys that start looking like this, very much starch and sugar, they get really tender-footed too, and it gets hard for them to walk and move around, because a lot of that is pushed around into and goes to their feet too. And then they tend to, usually when they get like this right here, most of the time they founder at some point too. And so it looks like he probably did at some point by looking at his feet and the way that he's rolled back and as thick as they are at the bottom. His front feet don't look too bad, but it could just be, well, they've chipped off. It could be just a good farrier that's kind of taken and gotten everything thick like that. But you can tell that he's been foundered at some point too, just from too much starches and sugars.
Do you want to give a real quick about your donkey rescue?
Yep.
Yeah, we're T&D Donkey Rescue. We're located in Liberal, Missouri. We rescue from the 4-state area. We rescue donkeys, horses, and innies. Anyway, we're 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we're a 100% volunteer-based organization.
Okay. We appreciate you coming all this way to show us these and be a part of this.
Thank you for having us. I think this is great for everybody to learn.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
So Ty.
So
We're gonna
anyway,
have to
we're gonna
wrap
the
the Facebook part.
Yep. So for the Facebook part, we'll wrap this up, and then we'll answer questions, and we'll go through the rest of these horses if we want to, and we'll stay as long as you guys want to stay then. But I hope that I was able to answer everybody maybe that was online if they had some questions or concerns at all, or watch this maybe in the next few days, because a lot of times the live shoots that we do, maybe people aren't on it at the time, but it's the views that we get and see later on that pops and comes up. So thank you in the cyber world for tuning in, I guess, and watching via Facebook, and we will catch you, I guess, next time. And if anybody else wants to make any comments or not.
Nope.
Hey, thank you.